Welcome to Political Beatdown. I'm Ben Meiselas, joined by Michael Cohen. We've got a lot to discuss on this episode of Political Beatdown. What the hell is happening in Venezuela? We'll cover that. Also, it seems, Cohen, based on the analysis that I did last night and this morning, there's actually 20 million pages that are missing in the Epstein files. And it's consistent with what you and I thought. But there was a new filing by the DOJ that really went underreported before Judge Engelmeyer, where they actually said that the total documents they produced, is about 12,500 documents, which they say equals 125,000 pages, which is like nothing. Like if you told me, Ben, there's a case that has 12,500 documents, I would say, is this like a PI slip and fall case? What do you mean it only has 12,500 documents?
You know how many documents?
Based on my background litigating, and Cohen,
when they seized my computer and they seized my documents from my law office during the raid, the FBI raid, do you know how many documents they got from me?
I'm going to guess 2 to 3 million.
10 million.
Yeah.
I was given 40 days to go through them all.
I just want you all to think about that. So from the seizure of Cohen's stuff, 10 million documents, okay? So if Cohen's was 10 million documents, what do you think any case involving billions of dollars in just financial transactions?
With 1,000 young women, right, who were allegedly, who were trafficked and raped and the whole nine yards, with dozens and dozens and dozens of these perverts. And so you could only imagine. Ben, I think your number is actually pretty close to spot on.
Yeah, well, and the way I derive at the number is just think about it this. 12,000 documents.
Yeah, it's a 10
125,000 pages. Do the division. That's 10.22 per document. So then you say 2 million times 10.22 equals 20 million pages.
Yeah.
That's not a shocking number. By the way, it could be as many. Like if you told me there were 100 million pages, okay?
I wouldn't be shocked.
I wouldn't blink at that number that there was 100 million pages,
hey, Ben,
because I'm used to dealing in cases that have that amount of documents. It doesn't shock me. I was one of the lead lawyers on a case in California called the MedCap cases. It was a big Ponzi scheme, Medical Capital Holdings, where they created these special purpose vehicles. And I was one of the lawyers for the receiver, a guy by the name of Thomas Seaman in that case, who worked for the SEC. And the SEC, raided the MedCap headquarters. There were criminal cases and civil cases that were going parallel. People want to look it up. You'll see it was like a $1 billion Ponzi scheme case where they created MedCap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then each one would basically pass on the profits to the next one to show that the investors were making money until they ran out of the Ponzi scheme, came to an end. But there, I think we dealt with like 3 to 5 terabytes, and the way we described it to the judges on the judge and to others, who are a prospective mock jury pool when the case was potentially going to go to trial, was imagine 3 to 4 towers, 80 stories high. If you loaded them with paper from the bottom to the top, that's basically the documents that we're dealing with. But Cohen, my team was 5 to 7 lawyers. And we got through it. Like, this is what you did. We go through them. You do keyword searches.
Now on, Ben, do I have to say A to every time that I answer a question from you? A, right? I almost feel like I'm responsible to do that, considering today, look what I received, Ben.
You got that Canadian. You got the Canadian passport. So
I passed. From now on, I have to say A after every single thing that I say. A.
If they ever do the kidnap of Cohen, we'll probably see that he wasn't there and he was actually in Canada. Eh? Well, Cohen, so I don't want to forget about talking about Epstein, because obviously what Trump wants to distract from is the Epstein files. He wants to distract from the terrible economy for most Americans right now as prices continue to rise. They call it a K-shaped economy. The rich get richer and everybody else does freaking horrible. And that's why they call it
But there's
K-shaped.
so much that they're trying now to distract us from, right? It's the Epstein file, affordability. You're talking about stagnant wages. You're talking about health care. You're talking about Israel and Hamas, about Russia and Ukraine. You're talking about a dozen plus things that affect everybody, right? And then all that the press is covering, all that they're covering, and they need to find ways to cover it, is Maduro and Venezuela. All right. As far as I'm concerned, and I've made it crystal clear, I've talked about it here before. I'm going to talk about it real quickly again. I think that Trump mistakenly opened up a Pandora's box right now that you cannot possibly close, especially considering when you start having this idiot, this asshole, Stephen Miller, turning around and talking about we have the right to dictate another country's economy, their movement, and their commerce simply because we put ships into the ports, or we surround the country in terms of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, etc. This to me is insane, because what do you think is going to happen? You really don't think that Xi Jinping is watching this and saying, okay, America did it to Venezuela. They're talking about doing it to Panama, to Greenland, to Canada, to Mexico, to Colombia. We're not going to go that far. We're not going for 5, 6, 7 different countries or territories. We're just going to go for Taiwan. All right. And he's going to maybe declare that Ching-te is, who's the president of Taiwan, is a security threat. He's a national security threat, that he violated the law. We don't even know what the hell that they're talking about. Very much like if you read the 25-page superseding indictment that is so thinly written that I don't think Maduro's even going to be held accountable. I don't think he gets convicted. What do you think about that?
I don't think that there was actually a thought out plan of prosecuting him. I mean,
neither.
He seems way too comfortable also in what transpired. And from all I've heard about his court appearance, people who were at that courtroom almost felt that it wasn't a serious environment, is what people told me who were in that courtroom. They felt that the fix was in. There's a very serious judge, by the way, who's going to take this very seriously. And you know Judge Hellerstein well. But it seemed from the parties, the prosecutors and Maduro, that there was a bit of theater going on in ultimately what's going to happen there. And I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, I'm with you.
I wouldn't be shocked, in fact, if there's a motion to dismiss for failure to state a cause of action upon which relief can be granted. All right. I wouldn't be shocked if they put in a dismissal motion and Judge Hellerstein actually grants it. And I'm going to tell you why. You're so spot on, Ben. Hellerstein doesn't play. First and foremost, he's been around since I think he was put on the bench by Bill Clinton in 1989. So he was something like 60 years old when he first became a federal court judge. He's 92 now. He has ruled against Trump on many different cases. He's ruled in favor of the administration on several, but he has also ruled against the administration, including he's the judge, to those of you that recognize the name, Alvin K. Hellerstein, who granted my habeas corpus petition when I was unconstitutionally remanded, ordering the government to release me immediately, and also placed an injunction on the first administration that they are now prevented from violating any more of my constitutional rights. So imagine that you actually have to have a federal court judge tell the Attorney General and the Department of Justice that they can no longer violate your constitutional rights. Alvin K. Hellerstein doesn't play. He's judicious and he's right to the point.
You know, the first motion you make if you're Maduro is what's called a 12B6 motion to dismiss for failure to state a claim. And you would assert as a defense sovereign immunity, sometimes called head of state immunity, that any sitting head of state cannot be kidnapped and tried while they are a sitting and existing head of state. And the Trump regime may try to say, well, he's illegitimate. He lost the election in 2024. And so therefore he's not the true leader and he's not really the president. The problem is that Donald Trump's social media posts basically give Maduro the perfect exhibit that he can attach to his motion to dismiss. Because on January 3rd, 2026, Donald Trump posts the following: the United States of America has successfully carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, who has been, along with his wife, captured and flown out of the country. So by saying President Nicolas Maduro and saying Venezuela and its leader, that would seem to give Maduro the right to claim. You see, this is an official statement by the President of the United States stating at the time of the invasion that I'm the leader and I'm the president. If Trump was truly working with the DOJ and coordinating this, what your statement would be is that he is an illegitimate leader who lost the election in July 2024. The thing is, for Trump to say that, he would then have to be supporting Maria Corina Machado, who actually is the opposition leader who was banned from the 2024 election by Maduro unlawfully. Think what you want about Machado, and I've become less of a fan of hers recently based on the types of things that she's been saying. I guess she feels she has to say this for her survival. I don't know, but she supported her proxy, Edmundo Gonzalez, who by all accounts beat Maduro by like 70% of the vote in the July 2024 election. But you see, Donald Trump does not support the opposition. Trump supports Delcy Rodriguez, who's basically part of the Maduro regime. So part of Trump's scheme is to hoist up Delcy, who was Maduro's VP, to basically be Trump's proxy there. She then cuts deals with the oil companies. By the way, Iran and Russia and China still have involvement there. They're just viewed as renters in Donald Trump's view of he's the owner of Venezuela. They're the owners of their spheres of influence, China, Taiwan, Russia, Ukraine, and deals are cut there in their spheres of influence. But Trump, by recognizing Delcy, also is recognizing Maduro. And by doing that, Maduro makes the argument of head of state sovereign immunity.
And you know how ridiculous this whole scheme actually is when you have Trump turning around himself and poking fun, saying that the basis for this strike is predicated on the Monroe Doctrine. Of course, inserting himself and morphing his name into the Monroe Doctrine. I mean, it's almost, honestly, if it wasn't that we're watching it in real time, I would say that this is a skit on like South Park or something, because it's just that crazy. The Monroe Doctrine, that we have a right to our sphere of influence for the, for our hemisphere. I mean, the whole thing is, can I say batshit crazy, or is it even worse than that?
Yeah, no, I think it's even worse than that, because at the same time, the Trump regime has threatened to invade Greenland, and they're not
Colombia and Mexico and
Colombia, Cuba, Mexico,
yeah,
Canada, but specifically, with respect to Greenland, which is a NATO member, which I think takes it. I think dealing with an invasion of any country is deeply problematic.
Can I throw one more thing in here, Ben? You know what really concerns me too? When I said that he opened up a Pandora's box, I was talking with Don Lemon about it before, and I totally agree. The Pandora's box is not just the seizing, the grabbing, the detaining of a leader. What happens if hypothetically somebody decides that Donald Trump is a terrorist, that Donald Trump has violated international law, and then they put out a warrant and they grab him when he's over at a G7 or a G9 summit? But more than even the president of the United States, who of course travels with massive Secret Service. Ben, what happens if it's a member of the cabinet? What if it's Marco Rubio goes to a country? What if it's even someone like Steve Witkoff or Jared Kushner who are traveling? They're not diplomats. They're just, I don't know, third-party fools. So they can grab anybody, even if it's a diplomat in another country. It basically just wiped out the entire concept of diplomatic immunity.
Well, and it wiped out America's role in the world before this. And let's be clear, America's done some beyond screwed up things with that role in the world. So I'm not trying to paint this picture of America's always been on the side of good, but I at least hope the arc would be tilting in a direction of a stable world order that was reflective of her horrible things that also existed, and reflective and celebratory of the good things. We can maturely balance both of those concepts in understanding the history of our country. But now, based upon, and I think it was Congressmember Swalwell who said this perfectly, he goes, look, Donald Trump couldn't run a casino successfully, okay? This is a guy who bankrupted multiple casinos over and over again, and who's bankrupted a lot of his companies. You think this guy is going to be able to run Venezuela?
How about run America first?
Or the entire Western Hemisphere? And bingo, Cohen. What about the United States of America? And what about what people here in this country are experiencing? Trump ran on a lot of heinous things that the media didn't pay attention to. But if you wanted to say, well, what was his message that was repeated by the media? No wars and affordability, and things are less affordable. And people are getting kicked off their health care right now. People have not been able to purchase their Affordable Care Act plans on the exchanges because they can't afford it. It wasn't a Democratic talking point. It's just the reality of what it is. And the rich, the billionaires are getting richer. I mean, and Trump saying, look, the stock market's going up. Well, people aren't feeling that. And it does also seem that the stock market goes up whenever there's bad news about the people. Like the market seems to, more layoffs, stock market goes up. More unemployment, stock market, because it means more rate cuts coming soon. It means more rate cuts.
Delve into that for a second, because the stock market, just so people understand, is not an indicator of the health or the what's the right? There's an economic term for it. Let's just say it's not an economic indicator for the economy. It is one small part. It is, as they would say, a spoke in the wheel. Remember, for example, that there are about 10 companies out there, 10 tech companies, NVIDIA, Meta, Amazon, Google, things like that end up basically pushing the stock market higher, because we're using those products and services more and more, so their profitability is greater and greater. The fact that the stock market is high, good. If you have stocks in a 401k, or you just happen to own stock, good, you're going to do okay. And you're certainly going to beat out, inflation. That I promise you. But that's not the only indicator for a healthy economy.
Yeah. And again, American people struggle Donald Trump says, in his speech today, drug prices are down 1,000%. They're down 1,500%. They're down so much. Well, it's so incredible how cheap and affordable everything is. I mean, did you see the speech he gave today, Cohen?
Sadly, I did.
He was at the Kennedy Center, which he's vandalized and called the Trump Kennedy Center. By the way, I've given this analysis for anybody who is supposed to perform at the Kennedy Center, who's worried that they'll get sued if they cancel their performance. And I give you a disclaimer that I don't practice law anymore, but I'll give you the argument that I would make if I was your civil defense lawyer and the Trump regime sued you for not performing. And I think it's a good one. Tell me what you think, Cohen. Donald Trump has vandalized the Kennedy Center by calling it the Trump Kennedy Center. So now the Kennedy Center itself is basically a crime scene. So by you performing at a crime scene, you are promoting the crime, and you can participate in unlawful or illegal conduct. So as long as it's called the Trump Kennedy Center, you need to not be part of a criminal conspiracy to promote the vandalism of the Kennedy Center. And you're deeply concerned because the Kennedy family has said that they don't support this, and Congress has said they need to. So that's my argument. I think it's a winning one on summary judgment.
I think it's a very clever sort of argument. I think there's a much easier argument to make, which is, the same way that I would never perform stand-up comedy at the Adolf Hitler Comedy Cafe, right, for various reasons, or something disgusting, like that. My audience are not Trump fans. They will not come to the center. Therefore, you are impeding upon my ability within which to, to pack the house, to profit, etc. So it's like an intentional, interference
with our business
relation and a contractual nature. That's how I would sort of run this thing. Only because, look, let me say this. I know people who are members of Mar-a-Lago, and I know their kids were getting married there. I know if I was invited to that wedding, I would not go. The same way I don't go, for example, to Cipriani restaurants since they terminated my membership. I just don't go. I don't frequent them. So if somebody is having a wedding there, I'm out. Well, if you're doing that on a large scale basis, as this president and this administration are doing, well, then there you go. I want to have a proper event. And the fact that this is what you're doing, well, doesn't work for me.
Right. So I think that both those arguments are arguments that
I like yours. I think yours is very clever, by the way. It's very dramatic, Ben.
Very, very, very. I try to bring the drama. That's I try to bring the drama. All right, but let's take a look. First off, did you see what Trump physically looked like during the speech? I mean, he was doing the thing again. Where he does the he was doing that again. This was supposed to be. I mean, this is what America's become. I mean, can we reflect on this for a second? I mean, show these photos and show the other one. I mean, this is what the country is. I mean, it's embarrassing.
You do have to say, it's one thing, like
the most embarrassed is it's humiliating.
Like when Barack Obama would, go to these things, or he even goes to them now. One thing you have to acknowledge, even if you're a MAGA, you have to acknowledge that he's got great timing and he has great delivery. Barack Obama could have been a stand-up comic, right? That's not necessarily Trump, but you do have to acknowledge that Trump on the stage is actually entertaining. It's entertaining because you can't believe that the president of the United States, that somebody like Trump is actually there making the statements and doing the things that he's doing. It's almost like, I don't even know how to describe it other than to say you almost feel like you're living in the upside down, right? That left is right and right is left and right is wrong and wrong is right. You get so confused by the whole thing. It's laughable because it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like watching a WWE match.
Correct.
It's like what?
Correct.
It's like watching, like not real wrestling, like not to offend WWE watchers. It's not real, but to watch a kind of cosplay, warped thing that's a train wreck as a human appeals to the kind of prurient interests of both like disgust and aghast and how is he getting away with it? Well, because you're letting him get away with it, because you're in your mesmerized and entertainment by the shit sandwich in front of you, you're allowing that conduct to be normalized, and that becomes a benchmark of leadership, when in fact leadership should be strongly condemning that behavior and saying that it's not acceptable. People have ceded their moral and formal authority to watching a dystopian reality show play out, and have given up their own personal agency to live through this almost appearing to be this dystopian simulation that's real, though. And then when people feel the consequence of it in the form of like death, because these things like what he did with COVID and his policies end up killing people, then there's just this general denial about the warped world that you're in. There is this mass psychosis a la Germany in the 30s and 40s, a la Italy in the Mussolini. Like, there is a now it is a smaller and smaller group, and Trump's polling is a disaster right now. That said, there's still a portion of the population that likes this while he's ripping away their health care.
And can I sort of give you the greatest analogy here? Can I just give you the greatest analogy? This is like a Bravo TV show. It's like either watching Jersey Shore with My Buddy the Situation in it, or watching The Housewives, where it's entertainingly ridiculous. All right. And it's still entertaining, but you do know it's fucking ridiculous. A bunch of guys there in Jersey, bunch of girls, everybody punching each other in the face, vomiting, throwing up, over drinking, the sexual exploitations. The whole thing is nuts. Or The Housewives, right? Like my friend Aviva throwing her leg, or the other one flipping Judice, flipping, the tables and so on. And the husbands are all punching each other in the head. It's so stupid, but it's almost like it's entertainingly stupid.
Yeah, and still the number, whether it's 36 or 38 or 39% of America, is into this. But then you have to find international parallels, right? And one of the things, that I find, interesting in drawing these international parallels is, what's going on in Russia right now, right? And what still fascinates me is that even in Russia, the general draft that they had before was unpopular. So what Putin did to draw recruits in is basically pay signing bonuses of around $50,000. Sound familiar? It's $50,000 signing bonuses to be an ICE agent or to be a border patrol agent, right? They give you $50,000 bucks. And so these 50,000 signing bonuses, where a annual salary in Russia in some of the rural areas, not Moscow, but or St. Peter, some of the rural areas would be like $10,000 makes you pretty wealthy in Russia. By the way, which is also makes it odd that Trump views Russia as this wealthy nation with all of these resources. Like $10,000 a year in a rural area in Russia makes you a pretty wealthy person. So what Putin's doing to recruit troops at a level of 300,000, 400,000, which is basically equal to the amount of Russian troops who die every year in the war, in their invasion of Ukraine, sometimes more, is offer $50,000 signing bonuses. People who are desperate take it. They sign up. They know what's happening. They sign up. They get put through the meat grinder. They die, and then more people sign up. And there is something that I think needs to be understood about the human condition, where people accept a desperate state as this is what their life is, that their life is tragedy, depression, death, and here and there you hope to get enough scraps to maybe just keep your family line going. Like what the US represented when we talked about an American dream, when we talked about these things, was actually something different from a historical experience that was very inspirational at the time in the late 1700s to the rest of the world. And the rest of the world then, saw some of these enlightened thoughts in operation, implemented it in their countries, and democracy spread, opportunity spread, and to see other countries advancing, making healthcare a human right in their countries, focusing on quality of life and paternity leave, maternity leave,
And here in this country, they make fun of it. They make fun of the fact that healthcare should be, as Bernie Sanders says, it's a human right, right? I mean, it is a human right. Imagine the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, and we're arguing with one another about whether all Americans should have basic health care. You know what pisses me off the most about that, Ben? Have you ever seen the health coverage policy that our politicians have? Can you imagine? They have a policy that is greater and better than any policy that you could buy. If you were willing to spend $25,000 a month for you alone, their policy is still better. It covers more. There's no everything. And mind you, all you need to do is win one election once. You could lose the next, but you have health coverage for life. I mean, this to me is so absurd. You want to talk about fraud, waste, and abuse? How about the fact that their insurance, their health coverage should be no better than yours or mine or any of our brigaders? It shouldn't be better than anybody else's. But the sickest part, we're paying for their health coverage too.
Yeah, no, it's
and it really pisses me off.
But I don't think these things are discussed, Cohen, enough. I don't think that there are, I think in people's overstimulated information everywhere, pervasiveness of social media, I think that an important thing about being a media company, being a news company, is to talk about these bigger frameworks and to talk about these ideas and to ground and situate things in life and shared experiences and to talk about these things. Because if we just are a highlight reel of here's what happens and here's what happens and this happened and this happened, we become a zombified audience that is just consuming the drama as though it is Jersey Shore or whatever Bravo reality show it is. And I think an important mental adjustment we all need to make, and I think we were doing a good job collectively, at the end of the last year, but then Trump hit us with invasions in Western Hemisphere, which I think was to bring down people's hope and optimism, is I think people were beginning to see at the end of 2025 hope at the end of this, that there could be a post-Trump world, that there's a way out of this, that there are these shackles that Trump has psychologically imposed on this country where people feel psychologically tortured, and there's a way out. Then I think people heading into 2026 have felt, not helpless again, but felt a little bit powerless and a little bit fearful of, oh my gosh, so this guy's now going to use our army to invade the entire Western Hemisphere right now. That's where he's going with this. And I think we all have to just remember and reflect how important 2026 is with these midterms, and why Trump wants to do everything in his power to make people so disenchanted and so disillusioned and rob them of their hope. So it's important that we give a jolt back of hope and optimism to people that we're in this together and start back off strong again.
But, Ben, if I could jump in on something here, because you bring up a good point, and you know that I very frequently, if not more than frequently, talk about Midas Touch Network and the importance of independent journalism, independent journalists, and shows like this one, and why it's so important. Well, how many times have you all heard me turn around and say, "Well, yeah, that comment that they're making about me, yeah, that's a lie." That one, yeah, that's a lie too. Oh yeah, that whole thing with the Russia hoax, the Steele dossier about me, that's all a lie. Well, I'm sure because right now, mainstream and cable news media, they're out there and all they want to talk about is Maduro. It's the flavor of the day, or may turn out to be flavor of the week. But until something bigger comes up that they could juice for profit and for more advertising dollars and so on, here's the big problem with it. They're willing to do and say anything. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the one thing that I can assure you that Ben and Brett and Jordy and nobody at Midas Touch Network ascribes to, and that's called lazy journalism. All right. Lazy journalism is when you just go ahead and you throw something in there and you really don't care about the consequences. Somebody else said it, so that gives you the right to say it too. Let me just give you a very quick example. So, in fact, I'm sure if you're watching any of the television shows, you've seen they have something called notable inmates held at MDC Brooklyn. Why? Well, because we all know that MDC, Manhattan Metropolitan Detention Center, which is in Brooklyn, is a absolute shithole. They say it's rat infested. Everything is broken. The place is really uninhabitable. Judges don't even want to send people there because it's that bad. Well, they have notable inmates that were held at MCC because that's right now where Maduro and his wife are located. Well, in this picture of 10 people, obviously you have Nicolas Maduro, Luigi Mangione is there, Sean Diddy Combs is there, R. Kelly, right, Sam Bankman-Fried, Reverend Al. Then you have Martin Shkreli. You may remember him with the EpiPen. Ghislaine Maxwell is there. You also have El Chapo was there. And, of course, yours truly. They have to always throw my name into it. In fact, if you want to see, this is one that came out from CNN. And there's the handsome guy right there. All right, at the very bottom. All right. I've never been to MDC. I've never been there. I was never processed there. I never stayed there. None of that is true. And I've been saying this over and over and over and over again. And the reason that I say it is because it's important. Facts matter. Truth matters. You hear so many lies about me, and they just get perpetuated on and on and on. Well, in fact, today CNN called me, and they apologized. And they're issuing a retraction, and they're putting on the statement, they're taking it off. And at the bottom, it will say, Michael Cohen was never at MDC. Oh, great, great. Yet there's still a bunch of idiots, especially on the other side, that feel that this is, I would sue them, but it just doesn't make sense. The whole thing just doesn't make sense. And why? All they needed to do is check any of the records, and you would find I was never there. When I was unconstitutionally remanded, I was placed in the Tombs, which is beneath 500 Pearl Street in Manhattan under the courthouse. That's where I was, before which they then shipped me back for more solitary confinement over at Otisville. But it is important. And, you've also heard me and you've read, if you read my Substacks, I turn around sometimes and I'll throw in a quote. Remember, there's a very famous quote. It's from Buddha. The three things that will always rise: the sun, the moon, and the truth. And that is what Midas Touch Network. I would have zero to do with any network where they can't get things straight. And by the way, everybody makes mistakes. Don't get me wrong. Everyone makes mistakes. But how you deal with that mistake, how you own the mistake, instead of just leaving it, that's the important thing. And so to those of you that are part of this community, just know one very important thing. what you hear here, it is not opinion. It's predicated on fact or firsthand knowledge, plain and simple.
I think it's important, Cohen, on January 6th that we reflect on this day as well, right? Because with the torrent of disinformation, malinformation, lies, fraud, crimes coming out of this regime, one of the biggest is their cover-up of the January 6th insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they would turn the White House official accounts into a criminal account to post lies about J6 doesn't surprise people today, because this is consistent with Trump's behavior. But if you think about it, the official account of the White House posting in the most Putin-esque, dystopian fashion, and what we all saw with our eyes didn't actually happen. And this is a post from the official White House account, 1/6/2021. Want to know the truth? So they blame the insurrection on Pelosi. And Trump gives a timeline. The White House official account gives a timeline of what they say happened on January 6th. And this is their timeline. Ashley Babbitt gets murdered in cold blood. Unarmed Air Force veteran and Trump supporter Babbitt is fatally shot by Capitol Police Lieutenant without warning as she climbs through a broken window. Mike Pence refuses to act. Vice President Pence, who had the opportunity to return disputed electoral slates to state legislatures for review and decertification under the Constitution, chooses not to exercise that power in an act of cowardice. Stolen election certified. After law enforcement clears the Capitol, Congress reconvenes late that night and certifies Biden's electoral votes from battleground states, marred by massive mail-in ballot fraud, hidden suitcases of ballots, exploding water pipes, voting machine irregularities, and unprecedented pandemic-era rule changes. Trump gets silenced by big tech. So that's Trump's timeline of what went down. Let me show you what Rubio said on January 6th, 2021, or shortly thereafter. Here's what Rubio had to say. Play this clip. Or we don't have the Rubio clip, it's fine. But Cohen, if you want to react to...
We had police officers, the men and women that we walk by every single day that guard the doors and we say hello to, out there with riot gear getting spit on and attacked. Today, not 10 weeks ago, just a few hours ago. And I think it's important to think about all those things on a night like tonight and everything that's happened. You know, I wouldn't even be here today. I doubt very much where I would even have been interested in politics had it not been for my grandfather. He died when I was 14, but I grew up at his knee. He would sit on the porch, he would smoke 3 cigars a day, and he loved history. He was born in 1899 in rural Cuba. It was still governed by the United States. It was a protectorate. 3 years later, it gained its independence and became a republic. During my grandfather's first 60 years of life, he saw his country have an armed insurrection after a contested election, multiple presidents go into exile, 2 military coups, and the rise of a Marxist dictator. A tyranny that stands to this day. My entire life, I have lived with and next to people who came to America because their country was chaotic and their country was unsafe. What I saw today, what we have seen, looks more like those countries than the extraordinary nation that I am privileged to call home.
That's what he said then. And think about the cowardice now. The cowardice now, and that's posted on the White House account. You have J6 insurrectionists who are apparently taking tours of the Capitol building right now, who are there in Washington, D.C. celebrating. And you've got Donald Trump, who pardoned all the January 6th insurrectionists. Many of them were recidivists, committed more crimes as soon as they were out. A lot of them committing vile and grotesque crimes once they were released. But you know, this is the state of play, and I know that a lot of corporate news doesn't want to talk about J6. Well, J6 this. Today, the Midas Touch Network devoted much of its coverage on a live to the shadow hearings about January 6th. And we've been covering those hearings throughout the entire day. And, I think that's our solemn duty to do that. Later on, in a few hours, we're going to also be doing a whole special on January 6th that I hope people will watch. But it's important for us to never forget that date, a day that will live in infamy, a day that we should never forget, and a day that, there were so many weak people who had the opportunity to stand up to Donald Trump at that time period. And we'd be far better off as a country right now had certain people showed courage, whether it's Kevin McCarthy, whether it's Mitch McConnell. There are certain people who I know, are just always horrible. And so is McConnell and so is McCarthy. I'm not trying to let them off.
And the worst part about it, Ben, is that they know better. Marco Rubio, what you saw in that video, that's legitimately real. Have you seen the expressions on Rubio's face when he's standing behind the president? I don't know if, Jeremy, you have any of those photos, but it's almost like, I wish to God that we had the ability, like a computer program, maybe an AI program that puts a bubble over people's heads and able to read your thoughts, because all I could imagine is him turning around saying, "You're fucking joking, right?" That's got to be the dumbest bullshit I've ever heard in my entire life. Because what you saw is diametrically opposite of what the things that Marco Rubio is saying and behaving like now. You see, Stephen Miller, he's a totally different animal. And I bring a lot of this lying stuff up because many times you've heard me turn around and talk about where people constantly say, well, Cohen knows more about Epstein than anybody. No, I don't. No, I don't. Again, do your homework, learn the facts, learn the timeline. I don't. I had nothing to do with Katie Johnson. That was actually being handled by a different lawyer by the name of Alan Garton. You could look it up. You could check it out yourself. But Stephen Miller has always been the same. He's always been this racist, this xenophobe. He's always had that same sort of affect where I can do whatever I want. Well, right now, he actually feels empowered that he can do it. Do you see when they bring him up on CNN or MSNBC or Fox and he sits there and he's a little guy and he pops out his chest and he's like, they cannot move. We have them surrounded. They are our prisoner. And unless we give them the permission, they will have nothing. They will have no economy, no commerce, no nothing. And so when you sit there, you're like, the fuck does this asshole think that he is? Seriously? I mean, I remember when they first brought him on, he was like a sidekick in his office just writing speeches. But all of his speeches had that same evil affect to it. And somewhere along the line, he stuck it out. And to his good fortune, Trump ended up winning. He gets elevated into it. And this whole sort of, and it's not just him, by the way. He married his female twin because the same exact hatred and that animus for anybody who's different. It's absolutely reprehensible. All of this nonsense, all of these lies that are coming out, all they do is distract us, which takes us right back. We're going to do the weave right now. We're going to do the weave and bing, 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 bring it right back to the beginning. It's all about keeping our eye on the prize, staying focused on the things like the affordability, healthcare, SNAP benefits, right? Talking about Russia and Ukraine and talking about, all of the other important things that right now that we have to contend with as a country. All right. And so, yeah, the two finger salute can only go to shithead Miller. All right. It is so just when I watch him because I have to. I watch him because I want to be able to come to you here on Beatdown or on my Mea Culpa podcast or on my YouTube channel, wherever the hell I'm talking. I want to be able to come to you, the community, our family here with facts, not with innuendo, but facts. And so I watch him, but I get I get sick. I truly feel sick after he's on. I really do, because there's not a single, and it's almost like he knows what he's saying. He believes it, but he knows what he's saying, and he knows that it's something that's going to get the boss's attention. It's going to get Trump's attention. And so that's why they're constantly pushing him out. But rest assured, just like everybody else, once that fucking shtick is no longer acceptable and people like us start really pushing back and the midterms turn, and then maybe, God willing, even the Senate ends up changing, because we know that we have the House. That's a 90% certainty. But the House may be a 50-50. If we can get that, all of this Miller shtick comes to an end. So, Miller, fuck you, dude.
It's a good two-finger salute right there to someone who absolutely deserves it. Great episode of Political Beatdown. I just got back from Disney with the family and took a little time off, although I was working at the Disney Business Center. But it was great to see my daughter there at the Disney park, and she was there with the princesses. And I was just reflective as I was there, with the family, what it is that we're ultimately fighting for and why we do this every single day. And hope that what we do here today will really be beneficial to future generations to not, frankly, have to do through this. This was not the timeline that any of us really wanted to grasp with or deal with. I think we wanted a normal, strong, empathetic, loving country that that continued to move towards the right side of history, although there are definitely setbacks and bad ones along the way. But here we are. We got through year one together of this regime. We're now in year two of this regime, and it's a big year. It's an election year.
Huge.
High stakes. And the stakes couldn't be higher when you've got unlawful invasions starting off the year. We got to remain solid together. We've got to be steady in our role at the Midas Touch Network. And we're going to keep on growing and building together. A reminder, make sure you subscribe to Michael Cohen's Substack. Cohen is an incredible writer, and his Substacks are a real joy and a privilege when I read them. I love them. So just subscribe to it on Substack. Search Michael Cohen. Make sure you subscribe, and we try to post
the real Michael Cohen.
And we try to post as many of Cohen's Substacks as we can on the Midas Touch account, also to let you all know why you should be subscribing to his Substack. Also, make sure you subscribe to his YouTube channel at The Michael Cohen Show. Subscribe there at The Michael Cohen Show. Also, be sure to subscribe to his audio podcast, Mea Culpa, MEACULPA, 2 words. Mea Culpa has been with the Midas Touch Network really from day one. The Midas Touches, but before there was a Midas Touch podcast, there was Mea Culpa, believe it or not, on the Midas Touch Network. So let's keep on growing this together. Cohen, thanks for all the great work.
Can I just leave our Political Beatdown family here with the thought, since especially you just popped into my head. Join me on this one, because you're a big Disney guy. You go to Disney with your wife and your kid now, quite a bit. So I do have one question that has plagued me pretty much most of my life.
Yeah.
Can somebody please explain to me how Goofy can have Pluto as a pet?
It's a good question. It's a great question.
I've never been able to figure that one out.
I think as you go
it
down
keeps
that
me up
rabbit
at night.
hole,
It's like, who invented liquid soap and why? These are the things I ponder, Ben.
but those are rabbit holes that you may not want to go down. So, but we'll just it could ruin your childhood, or it could ruin many childhoods if you start to really think through the dynamic. Just enjoy the It's a Small World ride, which I was impressed with. That Small World ride was, the amount of Small World characters there. I was like, it never ended, that ride. It was like 15 minutes. Anyway, I can go on and on with this. Thank you all for watching. Have a good one. We appreciate you. Shout out Beatdown Brigaders and shout out Midas Mighty.
Boom.